Welcome to the High Performance Edge, the podcast for contractors who lead with building science and want to turn that advantage into a stronger, more successful business. Whether you're in HVAC, insulation, solar, or home performance, we dig into strategy, sales, marketing, operations, hiring, and customer service approaches that power stable, more profitable companies. Hear from top contractors and industry experts as we explore what it takes to thrive as a very different kind of contractor. Here's your host, founder and CEO of Energy Circle, Peter Troast.
Hey folks, thanks for being here. Today's episode is both special and very hard. In August, we lost our friend and colleague Dan Wildenhaus, a longtime trainer and former contractor who had an extraordinary gift for taking complicated building science concepts and making them clear, understandable, and genuinely useful. I'd known Dan for years and had sat in on many of his conference sessions. He brought an energy and an exuberance to the room that made every talk a show you didn't want to miss, and where I always walked away smarter. We were very fortunate to record a webinar with Dan just before he passed, focused on new tools for specifying and sizing heat pumps. Many of the clips you'll hear come from that session, the full version of which is available on the Energy Circle website. Others were shared with us by Joe Medosch of MeasureQuick, a close friend of Dan's. Our thanks to Joe for helping us assemble this tribute. Listening to Dan in these clips, what stands out to me is his amazing ability to make technical material approachable, practical, and totally unpretentious, particularly for contractors and technicians newer to the idea of the high-performance approach. He always talked about doing things the right way, of course, but he explained the why and the how with a clarity that made doing things right feel tangible and very doable. We're sharing this episode in appreciation for his generosity, his exceptional communication skills, and the lasting impact he had on all of us. In this clip from our webinar on heat pump tools, he demonstrates a very unique ability to bridge the technical with the role diagnostics play in the overall customer experience. I would suggest that we start at a high level first, and then I know you're prepared to walk us through a bunch of these individual tools, which I think is super valuable. But let's start high level. There's a lot of tools now coming to market. Some of them are new, some of them are old, but covering the basis from planning to specification to design to load calculations. A lot of them are playing important roles in like the nature of the customer interaction with a homeowner in the house and obviously throughout the sales process. At a high level, can you paint a picture for us of this landscape? And in particular, I think talk specifically about what challenges this set of tools is aimed at trying to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good question because sometimes we get caught up in different industries with new things come out for the sake of coming out with new things, not because they're actually addressing challenges. But let's start with the basics of a heat pump, right? So in the olden days of yore, when all we had were gas furnaces or oil furnaces and propane furnaces, they tend to come in 20,000 BTU increments, right? And it's like the smallest furnace you can get is a 40,000 BTU. It's 40, 60, 80, 100, what you see out there. In the modern world of heat pumps, there are models down as low as 3/4 of a ton, and there's everything between quarter to half ton increments with these. We also have a couple of very divergent strategies, all electric heat pumps and then dual fuel heat pumps. So the suite of tools we're talking about really are designed to help us, now that we have this many more options and different strategies. These tools are designed to help us figure out which pieces of equipment are going to work best for the scenarios. They help us communicate to homeowners is one of the greatest uses of these tools. The value add for why you would go with this model versus that model, or why pick this size versus that size. So really, what they're answering is trying to re-simplify what used to be a pretty simple formula in a world where we've got much more complex pieces of equipment trying to do the same old job. So we want to heat, we want to cool, and we want happy homeowners. So let's find ways to do that. Let's use tools that take this complicated world and maybe not make it simple, but simplify the communication to the homeowner.
And is it fair to say that one of the one of the things about these new tools is that they are more transparent in the sense that the homeowner witnesses the contractor, whoever's in the home, actually using them, right?
Yeah.
Such that suddenly the decision making that may have happened around, all right, we think you need this system is more open. Is that right? And is that would you call that a significant change?
It can be, yeah. So they tend to show up either with a benefit during the assessment of the home or creating the bid. Joe Medosch once said something to the effect of, if you want to make the dough, you got to put on a show. And we took that to mean in the early days, a blower door and maybe an infrared camera. So some of these tools are really going to the value shows up while you're on the site. Some others, the value shows up when you write a bid or a report. And others, the value is in when you have that sit down, the kitchen table conversation with the homeowner. And I think that all three are important. So if you can adopt a tool that improves the user experience while you're at the house, while you're doing the assessment, you can adopt one tool there, adopt one tool that makes your bid or your report or your proposal really pop and make sense for them. And then pick one tool that helps you guide you through that kitchen table conversation. That's three tools. That's still a lot to adopt, but that's better than trying to adopt none. And now you've got yourself covered from the minute you walk in the door to sitting down with the homeowner and the report or the proposal or the bid that you give them. And the homeowners that have a positive experience with all three, that's where it's getting hard to say no.
I'd like you to just talk a little bit about how far over into the technical side. Obviously, these tools suddenly give us the ability to get very geeky very fast without too much effort. And we've been counseled for many years, don't glaze over your homeowner with too much building science. And then I'd also love you to just wrap by just maybe saying a little bit more about where you see the world going in terms of these tools. Like, what's the future?
Perfect. To your point, our buddy Bruce Manclark had once said, if you say CFM at 50 pascals to a homeowner, that's no different than RPM at 50 rascals, right? So there is some truth to this of let's figure out how much geek makes sense. My buddy Jonathan Moscatello at Mainstream Innovations came up with this in a presentation we've done a couple different times before, where his thing is the success of sales with heat pumps equals this kind of overlapping Venn diagram between technical design and traditional sales process. So you do need to find a way that these two fit together. You also need to be aware of things. Every homeowner's journey is different, right? They're all starting at somewhere different. For a heat pump sale, you might show up and it could be a planned replacement where they're making an investment, but it could be that their AC quit working. So you have to be able to think through where they're starting from and find that happy place between the technical and the sales process.
He was especially gifted at putting clear explanations to what's happening with the physics of building science, as in these two clips on the purpose of blower doors and infrared thermography.
To a lot of folks out there. Some of you may have on Tool Time many years ago seen, was one of the first times the public was aware of what a blower door test is. Traditionally in construction, for the Washington State Energy Code, for instance, there's a requirement that you do a blower door test right before you are done with the home. What this is really trying to do is just tell you how many holes there are in the house. That's all this piece of equipment does. A pre-blower door test, like we're doing today, is actually a way to gauge how close are you to where you need to be for Energy Code or for Northwest Energy Star Homes or another program, LEED or Passive House. They all have standards where they would like to see you at. But beyond just telling you how many holes you have, we're going to use today to walk around with an infrared camera as well and to use our hands. We're going to see where are the holes. So today the goal is to find where the holes are and see how close this green fab home is to its final destination, meeting the Washington State Energy Code, meeting the Northwest Energy Star specifications, and being able to meet some of these other LEED credits down below. Principles in building science about how air moves. Air moves from higher pressures to lower pressures. And if you want to think about what is he talking about, if I were to blow up a balloon, fill it full of air, you would probably say that you could see the balloon expanding. You could say there's some pressure in there working on that air. So if I opened the end of the balloon, you would hear it make that sound, but would you expect air to go out or air to come in? Well, air would go out because it's under higher pressure. So the rule of thumb is air goes from high pressure to low pressure. The second rule is that airflow, the amount of air is determined by how many holes you have and how much pressure you have. So what we're going to do today is we're going to set up a device that will move air through the building and will measure pressures at the same time. If we know the pressures and we know how much air it took to get that pressure, a little computer will translate that into how many holes there are. So first step is use the blower door, the computer, to tell us how many holes. And then with the infrared camera and by using our hands to feel air movement, we'll go around and we'll look to see if we can tell where those holes are. So according to my infrared camera, I can see a spot up where these beams penetrate and connect with the outer rim joist. And what I'm seeing here, depending on how well it shows up, is it's really dark right at the intersection, and then it fades less dark. And that could be for a couple of reasons. It could be because that's the coldest spot, and then it gets less cold as it comes into the house. That could be from conduction from the outside, or it could also be because cold air from outside is coming in and washing over this. Remember, we're sucking air into the house. So if that's a leakage spot to the outside, we could be sucking that air in. And as that cold air washes over this beam, it strips away the heat that's been building up from us being active in here, from the lights being on, from the construction work that's been happening. So in order to tell, is this a conduction issue or is this an air movement issue, I'm going to use my high-tech device called my hand. I'm going to get it wet and I'm going to see, can I feel air moving over my hand when I stick it up? So I've just licked the back of my hand, I stick it up, and sure enough, I can feel quite easily air moving through. So we've got air coming through this location from the outside, working its way through. First guess is, if it's happening here, is it happening everywhere? So we're going to want to take a look at some more spots along the rim to find out if that's an issue. If it is, at least we found it early enough, and we've identified something that they can correct in. And I do feel a little bit of air here, but it's not horrendous. It's a small amount of air through this penetration, which is a good sign, because this is a part where, as the building was shipped, these are some parts that were put together on site. So naturally, this is a place where we suspect could be an issue. But this means attention to detail as they're being put together was good enough that at least it's no worse than any other part of the rim joist. And that's, to a degree, a positive thing.
In order to make manual S a little less scary, it's helpful for me to think of it in completely non-HVAC terms. Have you ever gone bowling with that person that's so terrible that it's either 9 out of 10 are gutter balls, or they actually somehow wind up getting a strike in the neighboring lane, right? So what do bowling alleys do to help prevent that? Bumpers, right? That's what manual S is. Manual S is bumpers for your heating system selection. It just, it increases the chance of getting a strike or a spare with the size of a cooking bay. It's really just a set of, please don't make it bigger than this or smaller than this. Please adjust for altitude here. Please adjust for wet conditions or dry conditions here and here. That's all it really is, right? They make it sound more complicated.
For someone who many would place on the more technical side of the industry, Dan also had some very interesting and not necessarily mainstream ideas about the sales process.
Proponent of good, better, best for a long time. And I've seen contractors take this to the extreme where they have like 5 different categories or 4 different categories. But we're also into this universe where, with a lot of these programs, they're encouraging homeowners to seek multiple bids, right? So imagine the homeowner who's like, all right, I'm getting 3 different bids. If each contractor gives them a good, better, best, that's 9 different systems they have to evaluate, right? You ever heard of analysis by paralysis or paralysis due to analysis? That's what happens. They just kind of shut down and they just pick the cheapest thing because they're just like, this is too much to evaluate. So what we've started to see high performance contractors doing in response to this is moving to this. You called me, here's the minimum. This is just gonna work, it's kind of the standard thing. This is what I actually recommend, right? And what I recommend sends the message, I heard you. I heard what your issues were, your pain points. I'm providing solutions to them, and I'm adding value, and I'm not giving you anything that's not going to be beneficial to you. I'm not going to push the Tesla or Cadillac model on you if you're not interested in the Tesla and Cadillac model, right? This streamlines the process, and you're not saying this is the best thing in the market. You're saying this is what I recommend for you, for this house, for your needs. This allows that homeowner to really compare bare minimum against recommendation. Now, if a homeowner has 3 contractors, one of them only gives 2, a minimum and a recommended, and somebody else is giving 3, and another one's giving 4, right? They're gonna say, I wanna go to the one that was simplest to understand, right? It's an easy way to set yourself apart. This also keeps you out of having to sell, the crazy signature series, Arctic model that does everything for everyone in Greenland. We don't need a Greenland heat pump necessarily here, right? We all, I think, can agree with that. So part of how we can keep costs low is having the right sales process and adopting things where what we're really promoting, whether it's good, better, best, or minimum versus recommended, is that we want to draw the eyes to, these are the solutions for the problems we heard in your home. That's an emotional connection for homeowners. And most consumers, by and large, they make their purchases based on emotion, meaning it felt good, it answered their questions, right? And then they want to justify it based on facts, like price and efficiency. No homeowner has ever been like, you know what, I need a 22 SEER air conditioner, right? That's just like, come on. But if they have an air conditioner, 2 air conditioner, that can do all the cooling and a lot of the heating, and it's going to maintain really stable temperatures throughout the house, and it's going to filter the air for 45 to 50 minutes out of the hour during runtime instead of 15 minutes, that's the emotional value. They'll justify it to their neighbors and their friends by talking about the 22 SEER and the price break they got, the incentives they got, right? So just keep that in mind, that is how most homeowners work, which is why, what is a better sales pitch to a homeowner? Lowest price or comfort, indoor air quality, resiliency? Comfort, indoor air quality, resiliency, right? That is traditionally in HVAC what gets us our best sales, is speaking to the things that resonate with the homeowner's needs. But they do want to back it up with the rest of that. Anybody have to walk upstairs since they've come to Colorado this week?
Avoid stairs.
What's that?
Avoid stairs.
Yeah, it takes 3 flights of stairs is all it takes for you to be absolutely convinced that we need to adjust things for altitude when you come here. When I moved here, when I would visit, when I was living in Florida, and I'd visit and I'd do all these trainings in Denver, I was like, it's never a big deal. You know how many flights of stairs I'd have to go up when I was here? Half a flight usually, right? Now that I live here on the 4th floor, and that one of our 2 elevators is down, I swear it's like the Big Bang Theory in our apartment building, and I'm going up the stairs, it's like very apparent you need to just, right? The reason why is air at our elevation is a bit lighter in terms of mass flow. So that's why the same hitter will hit more home runs in Colorado than they will in Los Angeles, right? Now, I'm not saying there aren't people in Los Angeles who hit a whole lot more home runs than the Colorado Rockies do, which is quite evident if you look at their records right now. But that is something that's real that we have to factor in.
He could turn a phrase and was often quite funny.
If you say CFM at 50 pascals to a homeowner, that's no different than RPM at 50 rascals, right? I'm Dan, I talk a lot. If you want to make the dough, you got to put on a show. Closing tagline, with precision in your pocket, we empower technicians to work smarter, not harder, by turning data into decision. If you're not measuring, you're guessing. I like to start off all my trainings by saying, hi, my name is Dan. I'm a recovering contractor.
I hope, whether you knew Dan or you're hearing him for the very first time, that this episode gave you a taste of who he was and the impact he had. The recordings we could find and share with you here are just a tiny fraction of the time he spent in front of people teaching and pushing all of us to get better at what we do. It was a true privilege to have known him, to have been part of some of his misadventures, and to have been in the orbit of the exceptional human being that was Dan Wildenhaus.